tube amps in home studios don't often mesh very well together, and volume management may actually be the least of your concerns. That's why today I want to take a look at the Hughes Kettner Grandmeister Deluxe 40. This is a 4-channel all-tube amplifier that allows you to record directly, and that's going to be the focus of the video today. I'm going to show you how to set it up for direct recording and how to navigate through the different speaker cab emulation options. Really, that's going to give you a multitude of tonal options through one amplifier. So when I first started building my home studio here, it was built around the idea that I had this, my amp rig, a tube amp with a couple of cabs, and I wanted to capture the sounds that I was getting from that rig. So I invested in the microphones and the cables and things like that. And the first problem that I recognized that I had is that I couldn't isolate the cabs properly, so what I was hearing in the room wasn't translating to what I was recording. So that was problem number one. I did try moving it into another room. Actually, I ran lines into my bathroom, which is next door here. I tried to hide it in my shower, and still I couldn't isolate it properly. So really, it became a guessing game. Other problems that many of you, I'm sure, experience when trying to record guitars at home, obviously volume. I mean, I'm here in a home. I've got a family upstairs, young kids. Recording at night is just not an option. So I was just finding moments where I could record. It was quite frustrating. So I started using plugins just to see if I can get some work done. And as much as I was getting some interesting tones, it just never felt like it was my tone. You know, I was just using presets and things like that. Tried a modeler as well. Again, some really cool tones, just not mine. Other challenges that you may experience in trying to record guitars, I mean, miking a cabinet is a real art form and takes years to really truly master it. And if you're miking with two microphones and they're out of phase, nothing's going to suck your tone out more than microphones that are out of phase. So, and just, you know, having different options. I mean, if you've invested in one or two cabs, an amp or two, it can get really, really expensive. So there are limitations there, perhaps in terms of budget. So what's really great about this amplifier, it is an integrated solution because it has the built-in DI low box and cab sim built into the amplifier. Plus, if you go into bypassing the speaker cab, now you enter the world of IRs. The science of capturing a cabinet these days, people cannot tell the difference, and it just gives you a ton of tonal options. This Hughes Kettner really truly is a workhorse for the home studio guys because it's going to give you a lot of tone options. I mean, the amp alone has got 4 different channels, each with their own boost, and all these controls, they may appear digital, but all of your EQ and shaping in that is analog. It's a standard amplifier. They've just designed it so you can actually recall different presets controllable by a foot switch. Now, there are digital effects on here, digital delay, you got modulation effects and reverbs and things like that. It's not something I thought I would use in a recording situation because I don't record with my effects on, but using the amp more and more, I realize how useful those are, and I will discuss that in a second. So I want to show you how I set up the amp, record it, and then how I manage the different cabinet features with the built-in cabinet emulation. And my good friends at Audio Assault, who've got the Air Loader, which is a cab loader, and they sent me over their monster pack of just a ton of IRs to use. I want to thank Audio Assault for that. So we're going to take a look at that deeper into the video. All right, let's jump in and get Grandmeister set up for recording. All right, let me take you through the process of setting up the Grandmeister for recording. The red box in DI on the back of the unit, there's an XLR output. You take that and you can plug that directly into your interface. Now, if you've got some other outboard gear, things that you typically use, then you could follow a similar workflow. But the key here is to match the output setting on the red box with your audio interface. There's 2 options. There's line level and mic level. So you want to make sure that whatever you're going into your interface at, it's got to match. And the reason I mentioned that, obviously that's a basic 101 recording. But when we get into recording the amp with the cab emulation off, it's got that really gnarly sound anyways. if you're not paying attention and you're clipping, you might not notice it because it kind of sounds like it's clipping right from the beginning. And by the time you get into your mix and you start adding your IRs and you wonder why it's not sounding right, it's probably because it was clipping. Now, I did talk to Hughes and Kettner about this because in their documentation, it suggests to go in line level where possible. But I asked them, am I losing any tone using the mic setting? And they said, absolutely not. So actually, that's been my preference because I do just have a mic cable. So I'm coming out XLR into my interface, which automatically sets that to mic level. It gives me a little bit more headroom going into the interface. So I'm quite comfortable using the mic input setting for the amp, and that's working well for my sessions. The other thing to be aware of is the master volume on the amplifier. In a traditional sense, if you want to drive that amp, you want to really push the master, but you're also affecting the output of the amp, which is going to affect the input into your interface. So what I've done here is I've set up the amp close to my interface, and if I want to drive up that master, then I got to compensate my level on the input of the interface. When I first got the amp and I realized how hot it was, I found myself compensating by turning down the master. But in terms of shaping my tone, well, I realized I didn't want to do that. So if you want to jack up that master, just compensate again with the input level on your interface. The other thing to talk about is the control of the amplifier. There's an optional wireless adapter that you can get for the amp. I actually don't have it here, but I do have an extra audio interface and I have my laptop here. Certainly you can do this with the same computer you're recording on, but just convenience having it here on a separate computer. But I'm via the MIDI controls, the MIDI output and input on the back of the amp, I can connect it to my audio interface and then go into my laptop here. And I have all the extended control via the desktop application. If you do have the Wi-Fi adapter, you can actually connect to your tablet, which is actually something I think I'd like to do. I think it'll be more convenient to have the tablet wirelessly connected to the amp and I can move around. But I've set up here, this is pretty cool. So where this really comes in handy in terms of recording this amp is that all of the parameters on this amp, with the exception of the master, everything, the digital effects and even the standard amp tones, the EQs and the gains and things like that, even the noise gate are all controllable via MIDI. Now they're not digital, but they are controllable via MIDI, which is really, really incredible. And where the digital effects come into play, it was something that kind of threw me for a curveball at first because as a recording amplifier, I just didn't need built-in effects, so I thought. But when I got it here in my studio and I started using it, I found such a convenience to have them here because as I'm working on my songs, because typically I write on guitar, I write on bass, but in terms of the session, I get my bass laid down, get the drums and bass working before I go back in and do my guitars. So while I'm composing and working out my parts, it was so great just to have the effects on board. And I've got it sitting, I'm sitting right here. I can turn on some delays and get some ideas, things that I want to work on later on. This way I don't have to use plugins in my DAW. You know, you could have latency issues if you're recording through plugins and things like that. And once you're done and you're ready to record, this is where the app really comes in handy, is that you can simply you can make duplicates of all your patches because you can save all your parameters up to 128 different patches. You can save a duplicate with the effects off, or simply here, there's just buttons to turn off all of the different effects. Just turn off the reverb and turn off the modulation, delay, things like that. So that's what I did, is I set up different patches, you know, with my effects on, and then before I recorded, I went and I turned them off. So that's a real convenience. If you don't have the app and you're not using the desktop application, if you go into Effects Access, this is where you can now control all your effects, all these rotary dials now, which in amp mode will control the treble and bass and things like that. They're now controlling all of the internal effects. If you want to turn them off, you just roll them all to 0. That's going to cancel, turn off all the effects, and make sure you do that before you record if you don't want to record with your effects on. So the last thing I want to touch on is the red box itself. And by the way, I've created this little cheat sheet because it's hiding around the back. By the way, here's a little tip. There's an etching on the top of the amp, Deluxe, the top of the L. That's exactly where the red box is. There's only 4 switches. You can probably memorize them, but I put this little cheat sheet here just to make sure I got it right for this video. So as I said, if we start on the bottom, there's an on-off switch. That's going to turn the cab emulation on or off. So if you want to use the internal cab emulation, you turn it on. And then there's a couple of options here. You've got a vintage mode and a modern mode. So just a cab tune, more vintage, more modern. And then you've got small and large. And something I actually didn't know until recently, it's actually Hughes and Kettner that invented cab emulation. We kind of take that for granted with all the different cab emulation devices out there now and IRs and things like that. But actually, Hughes and Kettner actually invented it back in 1988. And I'll tell you that the built-in cab emulation is really good. And it's not You know, if you think in terms of an IR where you've got a snapshot of a microphone in front of a speaker and some room effect and things like that, it's actually like you're sticking your ear right in the cabinet. It's a really full speaker emulation, and that gives you a lot of latitude and a lot to work with once you get into your mix, and you can shape your EQ to really make those tracks work. So while there's only really kind of 4 options here, you're getting a very full sounding cabinet emulation. Sounds really, really good. So the other option is you can turn the cab emulation off, and that's going to give you that raw, gnarly amp tone, but now you are in the world of IRs. And as I mentioned in the opening, my good friends at AudioSalt were gracious enough to send over their Air Impulse rack and their Modern Masters IR pack. This is like a mountain of IRs, and the Air Impulse rack, it's a cab loader and really versatile plug-in where you can load multiple IRs, you can blend different ones, and there's a bunch of other tone shaping modules built into the rack, so you can really get those IRs working well for you ahead of your post-processing for your mix. I want to thank AudioSalt for sending that over. I'm going to put a link in the description. Make sure to check those guys out. They make amazing stuff. All right, so that's really the basics in setting up the amp. So why don't we jump onto the box? I'm going to show you the song that I've been referencing here that I actually created for this video. By the way, at any point when you finish this video, I've actually created a full video of that song so you can hear the full mix and how I treated all the guitars through that session. I'm going to put a link in the description. Make sure to check that out after you've watched this video. Some of the tones were recorded with the internal cab emulation, and some of them I've actually turned it off and used the IRs provided by AudioSalt. Got some interesting blends and really gave me a lot of different tone options for this song. So why don't we jump in and take a look at that. The number one production advantage for me is the ability to hear my tone shaping in real time. Previous to recording direct, my amp is here in the room, or as I mentioned, sometimes I can put it out in my bathroom, but I was never able to isolate my cabinets properly. So, but that tone that I was shaping in the room, I wanted to capture it, and I found myself fumbling and recording and listening and redoing. It just was not an efficient way to record. So in this method, I can hear the tones that I'm ultimately going to record. If I want to tweak the EQ, I can just play around with the amp, and then I'm hearing everything in real time, and ultimately that's what I'm going to be recording. Now, clearly, if you're in an apartment or things like that, and you've never been able to record with a tube amp simply because of volume, you can work on headphones with this method, but the same rule applies, is that you're hearing everything in real time. I know that's the reason why people are often driven to using plugins or modelers, because volume is an issue, but if you have the desire to use a tube amp, well, in this method, you can crank this amp to 10, and you can just create some amazing saturated tones and go to town. So, if we were going to record this particular tone, let's just give it a whirl here. And we go back and take a listen to what we recorded. It's the same tone. So really, really great way to work is you can actually hear the tone that you're shaping before you lay it down. If you want to work with IRs, we can turn off the internal cab emulation. So let's do that. Check your levels. Remember, with this really gnarly tone, look, if I just crank this thing up, other than volume, how would you know you're clipping it? It almost sounds the same. Now, depending on the resources on your system or the ability to record through plugins, we can go, I'll turn on the AudioSalt plugin now. So same thing now with the cabinet IR on. I can still go in and tweak my EQs and just get that tone the way I like it. The advantage here is later on, if you find that the cabinet you chose is not working for you in the mix, you can change it. That's a very modern way of producing guitars. Certainly if you're in sessions and you just want to get it done and too much nitpicking, you'll never get them done. But the flexibility working at home and creating your own tracks, if that's in fact what you're doing, you can record with full confidence knowing that you can change the cabinet later. And it's a really, really great way to work. I did that in this particular track where I previewed a couple of cabs that I thought were working, and then later on I decided to change them just because I was just really trying to shape a particular tone, and I had that flexibility to do that later. So ability to work on headphones, ability to preview your tones in real time before you record is a really big advantage for all you home studio guys out there. All right, the last thing I want to do is I want to take you through just one section of the song. I'm not going to do a full mix review and all the things I did. That'll turn this video into an hour. Certainly if any of you want me to do a deeper dive on the process of getting those tracks recorded and mixing them, just let me know in the comments. If there's enough interest in that, I will be more than happy to tackle that in another video. But what I want to do is just show you one of the sections of the songs. I have about 5 different guitars. Some were recorded using the cab emulation, and some of them I turned it off, and I'm using our Audio Salt IRs here. And I just want to show you how they all work together in the sort of range of tones that you can get out of one amplifier. For the main riff, let me just isolate that section here. So that riff is, we've got 2 guitars. On the left side, I'm utilizing the plugin from Audio Salt, so this is what it sounds like isolated. And remember, with the cab sim off, I'm going to apply the IR. And then on the other side, I'm utilizing the cab emulation in the amp, and I believe I'm using the modern tuning large cab, I believe. Let's take a listen. So when you put the two together, a lot of range in that tone. I'm using the humbucker on the left side a little bit brighter. I'm using the neck position on the right side a little bit bassier, blending them together and panning them left and right to get a nice, really big, fat sound. A couple of the other tones here. Let's go to the clean side. So this is, we've got the little chimey guitar that happens on top. Actually, it involves 2 layers. So the main one that's more prominent is this one. So that's using my Sir guitar. I was using the Howard Roberts for the first one, but this one I'm using a Telly style guitar, single coil, a little cleaner, and then I'm using the internal cab emulation on the Grandmeister, and that's blended with this other sound, which is actually using the clean channel on the Grandmeister, but I'm using the cab sim with the Audio Salt plugin. Give you an idea of the nice clean chimey sounds you can actually get from this amp as well. And when you blend the two together, and then placed together with the other 2 guitars. And then last, I've got this guitar on the other side. It's also a clean part. So it's a nice clean sound, and here is what it sounds like when you don't use the cab emulation on the amp. When you add the IR. So you can hear how much it cleans up. And as I was talking about before, being careful with your levels when you're recording the sounds without the cab emulation, that really gritty sound, really got to make sure that your levels are in check, because you'll see it cleans up nicely when you add your IR later. So here's the whole brew all together. Well, there you have the Hughes Kettner Grandmeister Deluxe 40 all-tube amplifier. Aside from all those great killer features that let you record this amp directly, it's just a great sounding amplifier, bottom line. Do you own a Grandmeister yourself, or perhaps you're considering getting one? If you have any questions, any thoughts, please just leave them in the comment box. If you're new to this channel, I hope I've earned a subscribe. I've got a ton of videos on this channel, many revolving around this home studio that are geared to hopefully help make your home studio life better. So just hit that subscribe button and come along for the ride. If you really want to support this channel, I am on Patreon. Links to everything I've discussed and some things I haven't are in the description below. And above all else, I hope I'll see you again in another video. As always, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And please like, subscribe, and ring that bell to stay up to date. Remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. There are a lot of great musical projects you can do by yourself, right from your own home. I hope to see you again next time.